remains of energy resources, fuels. But before we go to nuclear fusion, I mean, you really see the miracle here is that let's take, for example, an experiment that was done, and this is where I get really excited because it also relates to the search for communication with other star systems.
Okay.
You see in this experiment done, and this is in Water, the Great Mystery, where they take a pitcher of water, and they separate the pitcher of water into two pitchers of water, and they separate both pitchers at a great distance. And when you expose information to one pitcher of water, the other at a distance restructures itself according to that information instantly, using atomic clocks.
That's incredible.
Instantly. And what amazes me about that is over and over and over again, no matter how far you go back, and going back, actually, there's a Russian scientist named Alexander Zhijevsky, whom in the 1930s noticed that bacteria in water would constantly become agitated during the exact moment of solar flares. And he noticed this over and over and over again. Whenever there was a solar flare, the activation of the bacteria going crazy happened before the solar radiation hit the Earth. In fact, it takes 8.3 minutes for solar radiation to travel from the sun's 93 million miles from Earth to get here.
Right.
So the bacteria knew it instantly. Why? Why did the bacteria in the water know? Well, the interesting thing is our sun is 93% hydrogen, and there's oxygen in the sun. And that means that these two bodies of water at a distance are actually talking to each other instantaneously. And the bacteria in the water gets activated because the water is receiving this information. Now, when we consider the vast distances, for example, the distance between our Milky Way galaxy and the Andromeda galaxy, which is 2.2 million light years away, if you were communicating using radio waves with Andromeda, if we could, it would take over 2.2 million years to get there. But yet, the hydrogen in the stars in the Andromeda galaxy and the hydrogen in our stars and the spiraling arms of the Milky Way galaxy and the water in our own bodies can communicate instantaneously over these.
See, you're onto something, David.
You see, there's something going on here. There's something so deep going on here that it's literally starting to explode because the numbers of researchers who are exploring water. In fact, I got myself right in the middle of one of the greatest, recent discoveries in water, which we'll get into in a bit here. But you see that it's an argument. I mean, it's not like, it's actually announced in all the peer-reviewed press and, Scientific American, water has consciousness, it's unanimous. One of the things you find in the physics community is whenever something is new, even when, in fact, this is a great example, as early as 1927, people, at the 5th Solvay Conference on Physics at Brussels, Belgium, where Einstein, Heisenberg, Niels Bohr, Max Planck, Paul Dirac.
The heavy hitters were there, David.
All the heavy hitters were there. And one of the major subjects at that particular conference was mind over matter. Heisenberg and Niels Bohr came to Einstein and said, it looks like the results of the experiments are being affected by the minds of the researchers. And Einstein flips out. This is 1927. This isn't, the ideas that were introduced in films like What the Bleep Do We Know and What's Happening with Water, this isn't new. They've known this since 1927. And Einstein wanted this mathematical universe where you could predict, for example, the position of the sun and where the Earth will be tomorrow. And these things are easy. It looked like using light to measure events in the universe was so reliable that what scientists thought would happen is when they went into the micro-universe, quantum physics, into the atom and smaller, finding the position of where the electron would be at any given time and its angular spin was unpredictable. They couldn't predict anything. And this is where they started to go crazy. They started to realize that it appeared consciousness was inexorably linked to matter at the quantum level. And because consciousness is unpredictable and random, just like the way we think every day, should I do this or should I do that? And a person decides I'm going to put all my money in this stock in the stock market, and it goes down that day. or it goes up. I mean, this is how the mind works. The subatomic particles were behaving like the way people think. And Einstein couldn't put a mathematical formula on it, so he went crazy. But over 10 years later, he's the one who said that anyone who becomes seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit, not a force, a spirit was manifest in the laws of the universe. A spirit vastly superior to that of man. And that is where this is all going. That if we go, George, I believe if we go deep enough into what's happening with water, and we'll demonstrate this tonight very faithfully, I believe, that the answer to all of our problems can be found in this Holy Grail, in a cup of water. There is so much energy in a glass of water. We could power, factories, cars, everything with this. And I'm not just talking about hydrogen. I'm talking about fusion.
And David, is it the water or is it just the hydrogen part?
It's all of it. It's hydrogen. Remember the experiment that was discovered by Alexander Zhijevsky, which is in the 1930s, which is only years and moments after the Solvay conference in 1927. That's when he notices that the bacteria in the water are becoming agitated instantly upon the activation of, say, an X-class solar flare. Not 8 minutes later. They have pre-knowledge or precognition. See, water, in fact, it's already being used in Russia as a sensor as a what you call precognition to earthquakes. They're already using it in super sensors now. But now we know, because water can communicate over any distance in the universe through what's called Einstein's spooky action at a distance, which is the only thing Einstein discovered that was faster than light. We're now finding that not only is water possibly, it's conscious, but the question of whether it has intelligence is a much deeper question. But now we see that this idea of this superstructure that is happening in the sun may be the secret to nuclear fusion, and that is a very, very exciting breakthrough. Very exciting breakthrough.
And I also think that the possibility of health issues is dramatic.
Well, the possibility, it's already being demonstrated. And just in Japan alone, and a lot of this is thanks to Masaru Emoto's work, restructured water in the health industry is a $1 billion a year business. When we look at, for example, Masaru Emoto showed us, and there are also many labs in Russia, people like Leonid Izvakov is also doing this. In fact, he's the one who took my photo, which is up on your website, of the sound of the sun, which we'll get into.
Nice job, by the way.
And what we find is that when we look at ordinary tap water, which most of us are drinking in our cities, it just has horrible structure, horrible architecture, and it basically is robbing us of energetics. In fact, even Andy Rooney said on 60 Minutes when they tested all these bottled waters that they were energetically dead. I mean, I was really amazed to see that.
But you can change that, can't you?
But you can change that by putting intention, it seems. You can change that by putting music. When we see what happens when we put Beethoven and Bach.
Let's talk about all that, David, when we come right back on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Noory. David Cerrito with us. David's work, the latest, we're talking about Water, the Great Mystery DVD report. David, let's get back into the science of this, first of all, because I find it fascinating. It's almost as if, is it accurate to say that water, and we're going to talk about what it allows us to do. We're not just talking about water, folks, but it has an incredible ability. Do you believe it's alive?
I believe it is alive. I believe ultimately that everything is alive, but I think water, being made of hydrogen and oxygen, number one and on the periodic table of elements, that it was the universe's way at the beginning of creation to establish kind of the universal hard drive, or what metaphysicists call the Akashic records. Because water has memory and it establishes itself within 100 to 1,000 seconds after the Big Bang, both hard, heavy water, deuterium is, I think, about 100